Welcome, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. No, you are not looking at a time error. We are actually starting at 6 o'clock p.m. today, but special treat because we're actually going for 2 hours. So instead of going from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. or from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m., which we normally do, we're going from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. And I think you're going to thank us for it because we have a we have a jam-packed show for you tonight. Before we get into today's topic, we are going to introduce our co-host and our guest for today and our moderator. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. First, starting off with Mr. Clinton James.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. This is Clinton James, your local real estate broker here in San Diego. And as in usual fashion, I usually tell you where you can find me. And you can find me in the corner of working on myself lane and inspiring others drive. We buying back the block in real estate. We definitely buying back the block.
What? He added a little Usher punch to it. Okay, all right.
Up next, we have Mr. Mike D. Money Guy.
Wait, hold on. Did CJ just nail his opening intro?
He nailed it.
Practice, man. Practice.
He nailed it. And he put some extra
it,
sauce on it. He put some extra sauce on
Murdered
it.
it, dog. I can't believe this. What up, though? What up, though? What up, though? It's Mike the Money Guy, CEO of Decade Financial, your one-stop shop for all things credit and money related. It is a Tuesday night, last night of the new year for this show. Doing a collabo. Love you guys. I'm super happy to have you guys here.
All right. Up next, we have Mr. Taryell Simmons.
Yes, it's Taryell Simmons, your local career and business strategist, reminding you to do what you love what you do. Don't chase the money. Let the money chase you. Yeah.
All right.
Yes,
all right. And also, again, don't adjust your screen. It is two shows combined today. We do have two very special guests from one of your favorite shows on GOD Radio 1 from Mindful Moments. We have with us Miss Merencia Henson. Please tell the world hello.
Good evening, everybody. Again, my name is Merencia Henson. I'm a licensed social worker as well as a mental health therapist here in San Diego, working with children, adolescents, and adults with severe and persistent mental health disorders, as well as intellectual disabilities. Again, myself and my two cohorts, which is Walanda Johnson, as well as Cresheia Lee, we have our own Mindful Moments mental health radio show every other Thursdays. So I'm so glad to be on your all's shows tonight.
Thank you for coming on our show. And we have Miss Walanda Johnson.
Hello, everyone. I'm Walanda Johnson. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I practice privately, providing mental health to adults and some couples, but mainly adults who are dealing with anxiety, life stress, work stress, depression, and things as such. So thank you guys for having me.
Thank you for coming. And we know under circumstances, we really appreciate you coming. And up next, we have, last but not least, Miss Marshaun. I'm not even going to try to pronounce your last name. I don't do it right.
Well, thank you for having me, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out this evening. My name is Marshaun Olaniyan, and I am a life and relationship strategist, and I am also your moderator for this evening.
Yes.
So let's get into a brief reason why we decided to join today's show. There's a lot of things to talk about when it comes to relationships between there's love, there's mental health, relationships between ourselves, there's family dynamics, there's kids, there's relationships, there's all different types of relationships out there that we have to have in our lives. And today we wanted to talk about relationships when it comes to your own personal love relationships. That's how we're ending the new year. And with that, it was going to come a lot of things because it's not sometimes just about romance, but it's about what's inside of you, what's creating a successful relationship or what's not creating a successful relationship. So we do have Marshaun on today who's going to moderate today's show, where all of us are going to discuss the information he's going to give us on how we all can better create relationships between one another, especially when it comes to relationships between husband and wife and or fiancés or if you're dating. So Marshaun has 10 things she's going to talk about. We're going to go over it for 2 hours, and I'm really looking forward to today's show. So you guys, if you are watching live, if you have any questions, please write it in the comment section and we'll try to get a chance to ask that question. All right, Marshaun, You got it.
All right. Okay, so how the show is actually set up is that I have 5 questions for the gentlemen to answer and 5 questions for the ladies to answer. But at any time, if because I want to start with the gentlemen, but at any time, ladies, especially since you guys are mental health therapists, at any time if you hear something that you have a question about or just that you want further discussion about, please do not hesitate to jump in so we can continue the conversation going back and forth. And especially with your backgrounds, if there's something that you feel that could benefit the audience, specifically from a mental health perspective, then please let us understand it further from that perspective. So are we ready to go ahead and jump in, fellas?
Oh
Yes,
Lord,
sir.
I feel like I'm about to be put on therapy right now. Oh Lord.
You know what? Okay, so let me just back up and say that the questions are derived from conversations that I hear all the time from clients, from friends, from me just ear hustling, people calling me just, asking me questions specifically about relationships in general. So the first question is around vulnerability. So men, why does it seem so hard for you guys to be vulnerable with your spouses or your partners? Again, it seems maybe we're seeing something wrong as women, but why does it seem that you guys kind of hold back in the vulnerability area?
Okay, start it off, Clinton.
Oh man. Thanks, William. Thanks, William. Okay. Yeah, I mean, Marshaun, one of the things that that as a man, as you grow up as a man, you'll find that we're not built to show vulnerability. That starts as a young boy. As a young boy, we're told you can't show weakness, and that starts as you grow up into teenagers. Now you realize that a lot of things compound upon each other because at the end of the day, men tend to they don't express their hurt. They hold it in a lot. And it tends to expound itself or show symptoms when we get older. And a lot of times we are very, I would say we don't show vulnerability. We are very careful. We move very carefully as a man because we base our current relationships based upon our past experience of hurt. And that's something that you'll find that it starts as a young boy. It's kind of like you can't show vulnerability, you can't show weakness. And at the same time too, it's kind of like a balance you got to play with that, because not showing weakness and being that head of the household and that provider and stuff, you go out there and you have to face the world, and you got to take on a lot of different attacks coming at you. So it's kind of like, yeah, you have to be that I would say that hard person on the outside that doesn't show vulnerability when you're outside of, but when you're in your family unit, you got to play that role now of being transparent, being vulnerable, being open, and that's playing that balancing part that's hard for most men, because we see it as almost as a sign of weakness, because it's kind of like when men come around men with their family. It's a little bit different. You see, your wife would say you act differently around your friends than you act with your family or you act with me, so that's my explanation, and I think the guys will have their own explanation too on it.
Yeah, I would have to agree with Clinton. When you feel like you are leading, you're supposed to be leading the family as the man. A lot of times we look at leadership as someone who doesn't share their vulnerabilities to the people or person that they're leading, because it may show weakness or it may show an inability to lead, which may seem like it may cause the woman to judge you in a way where you don't want to be judged. You don't want to be judged and looked at as weak or not being able to lead or making mistakes. And we all know, just being human, you're going to make mistakes. But I think if you're a man who really wants to have a successful family, you feel like a lot is on your shoulders. And when a lot's on your shoulders, you don't want to show your wife or your kids that you are vulnerable and you hurt. You want to show that you're strong and you're there for them, and you got this. And when you looks like you're vulnerable, it may look like you ain't got it, which may cause doubt, and maybe the person you're with may take that it may seem like they may take that love away or respect you less. But I know men love respect.
You know,
Can I say something just
Go
to
ahead.
pull something in? So as a mental health therapist, I have some questions or maybe some statements to say to that. Many times when I have male clients, they say just as that. So my question is, what can you do consciously for you to be more aware of to stop that generational adaptation, right? So it's like, okay, I know this is how I was raised, this is how my daddy did it, my uncle did it, my grandfather did it. But on the flip side, if you know that vulnerability can make, you know, your relationship stronger, then you also have to realize by me changing that narrative, right, it's going to teach my sons how to become even a stronger man, because boys grow up to be fathers, boys grow up to be husbands. So have you thought about it? Okay, yes, even this is how I was raised. Let me make more of a conscious effort and let me do it for my sons, but also to do it for my daughters, so they can see what it looks like to be in a relationship with a man or be a man, to change that narrative. So I just want to just throw that out.
Oh, that's a good one.
Great
This
point.
is something I'm still unpacking with my therapist too. And you brought up a whole bunch of good points. So first, emotional intelligence, right? I feel as though, especially men of color, we're stunted in our emotional intelligence because of our upbringing, whether it be society, where our programming, things that are around us, that they, you know, growing up, they say, oh, man up, right? Don't cry, you know, be tough. And then sometimes, even if you're raised by a mother, you know, there's some of that emotional support that they give, but they also try to prepare you a little bit to, you know, you're gonna have to be strong, you have to be the man, right? And because we're conditioned that way, it takes a little bit more effort to come to that point of reaching that level of emotional intelligence to say, hey, I need to work on this, right? And there's still things I'm working on to this day, that I realize that I need to change within myself so that I can open up. Because real leadership is vulnerability, showing that it takes extra strength to be vulnerable in that way to
Right.
your mate, your partner, to the world, society, and that's more strength than, you know, that tough guy facade that we kind of put on to try to navigate the world. And so there's a lot to unpack in that statement alone. Just the fact of that we have you here and we're approaching that topic, because most men won't even go see a therapist to talk through this emotion, right? In the first place, that's a taboo thing. We don't talk about our problems. Not here. We put on Good Times or the Cosby Show, and that's how we deal with our problems, right? And we don't get into that self-diagnosis, talking about it, crying about it, and you know, going through the whole emotions.
Right.
And you're being vulnerable now, so thank you.
Yeah, you really were.
Let me ask you guys a question about the vulnerability. So when you say vulnerable, what kind of more are you talking about? Vulnerable that, you know, you hurt, or vulnerable that you make mistakes? When you talk about vulnerable, what is it that you're looking to see in vulnerability in a guy?
So for me, it's everything. It's everything. It's the crying. It's the saying that, you know, I'm weak in this area. Actually, you know what? I don't have it all together. Or coming to me or coming to your significant other and saying, hey, seriously, I need some help. Like, for real. I know I'm the man of the household, and yes, I want the respect, but seriously, I don't have this one. I need some help from you so we together can figure this thing out. And also not feeling like you have to figure out everything by yourself. And I know that's innate, right, for you guys to figure it out. But when you have a partner, when you have somebody that you're saying that you're trying to build a life with, and then especially if you decide to go outside the home and even share it with your friends, I'm now left out of that part of your world. So I don't get to see that vulnerability that maybe you might even take to one of your male friends and have this discussion. Maybe you break down, maybe you don't, but he gets to see that side of you. And I either never do, or it's very, very rare. So that's what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about everything that comes with the word vulnerability. If the ladies have anything else to add, please do.
Absolutely. And I remember a gender study or gender's training that I had, and men's number one need is respect. Women's number one need is safety and security. I'm not going to feel not safety and security like, yeah, like, you know, I'm not going out. Like, no, like I need to know emotionally I'm safe.
Mm-hmm.
Physically I'm safe too, but I need to know emotionally that I'm safe. And that it's secure and the attachment is secure. And if that attachment comes through vulnerability. You don't attach to someone without being vulnerable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, and that's in any relationship, whether it's romantic or platonic or, you know, your best friend, like you and your best friend are best friends because you guys had some vulnerable moments. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, all of that, like Marshaun said.
Yeah. And I just want to add to, I mean, it every situation, it depends, because I mean, vulnerability for a man, it takes time. And as I said, I have to say, sometimes you can't say vulnerability. Not showing vulnerability is a bad thing because it depends upon the situation. Like most men when they go out to their jobs, they can't show vulnerability. We can't sit down and start crying about a situation that we are in to the boss, right? Mm-hmm. It's that we're gonna be, then the next day we're gonna be fired. Or it's in the military. In the military, we can't go to the war field and say to war and be like start crying or like being vulnerable, because that can get you or yourself or your partner killed. So I mean, for men, it's a little bit different because even when we play sports, right? It's a difference in how you see some coaches actually treat some athletes. You know, you toughen them up because what I believe is that sometimes we have to callous our minds against pain. You understand? And callousing your mind against pain, it tends to actually create certain things where we can't show hurt, or it helps us to go even deeper within ourselves and push ourselves to understand how far to the limits that we can go. And if we show any type of vulnerability during those situations, a lot of times we would never ever understand how far. Now, as I said, there's a different type of strength when it comes to vulnerability. That's more innate. You know, that's more where you have to actually open up. And when you're being built a certain way to handle the world a certain way, it's hard to like balance that a lot of times for men. And that's what I'm kind of like trying to we have to find that balance basically.
I just want to clarify, when I say attachment in relationships, I mean your close relationships. I'm not talking about your boss. I'm not talking about your neighbor. I'm talking about your close relationships. In order for there to be an attachment, a bond, a secure attachment, you have to have a level of vulnerability.
Right.
Just want to clarify.
What if your lady don't like that? What if you with a lady who don't like seeing her man cry or showing that he don't have all of the answers? Because there are some women you could be in relationships with that don't want to see that. They expect you to, you know, not be that. They don't expect to be that shoulder you could cry on. You know, don't do that with me because I expect you to have all the answers. So what about those men who are relationship with women?
So for me, you know, have you ever read the book, and not just towards you, but have you ever read the book, The 5 Love Languages?
Right.
And I think that's very important to really understand your spouse, your significant other, to really understand like what is his or her love language. Because like you said, if she was raised very tough, you know, upbringing, let's just say, or she didn't have that mom or dad to really show that love and affection, she's probably going to show it in different ways. And then also too, if you have that vulnerability with your spouse and you can say, you know what, babe, like maybe your love language isn't, touch or isn't words of affirmation, but mine is gifts. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Or at least she'll know that when you're feeling vulnerable or when you're feeling down, okay, I understand that with him, he needs this or he needs that to just for him to understand that I do care for him. So just having that open communication and again, being vulnerable, like, hey, babe, like, this is my love language, and really allowing him or her to understand what it is, even if it isn't hers, that will really help you with that.
I wanna propose a question to the women, and it comes from an interview I watched with Nikki Giovanni and James Baldwin when he was talking about honesty and vulnerability, and he was talking about in a way of when he brought that to the table, it wasn't showing up or manifesting like she wanted it to see it in the best self. And she's like, when you go out there, you go there and fake it for the white man, and the white man gets the best of you. Then you come home and you're vulnerable with me, but I get the worst of you. If you love me, of course you can lie to me, and you will because you love me, and you're going to do it. So I want you to fake it for me, just like you fake it for that white man that you're getting the paycheck from. Mm-hmm. So how much of this vulnerability do women really want, right, in the relationship? And what are the parameters of how we express that vulnerability and harness it and have these dialogues and conversation?
Well, right on time.
And so for me, and I can only speak for myself, right? Trust is huge. And I know that if I trust my spouse, which I wholeheartedly trust him with my life, and I'm talking about spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically, it's okay. And I feel like I can be vulnerable because I trust him. And because I trust him, because I can be vulnerable with him 100%, then allows me to feel secure, like Walanda was saying. So for me, the foundation is honesty and trust. And if you're friends first and you really get to know your significant other and you have that foundation of friendship and again, getting to know that person, that trust and honesty, for me personally, that really sets the tone of gradually throughout the years being more and more vulnerable. Because the more vulnerable you'll be, you're either going to get closer to that person or you're going to step back like, you know what, last time I was vulnerable, you threw it in my face, right? Or last time I was vulnerable, you told your mom and daddy, whoever. So you may like backpedal, right? But if you gradually see like, you know what, the more I'm telling him, the more, he's trusting me, I'm trusting him. It's just between us two, you're praying for me through my weaknesses, whatever, that's going to allow you to grow closer so that you can be more vulnerable. So again, for me personally, it's the foundation is trust.
Absolutely.
There you go. You hit it.
Right.
Well, you know what? I'm super glad that you brought that up, Merencia, because we need to move on to the next question, which is actually about trust. So specifically to the Black men here, love you guys so much.
We love you too.
When it comes to speaking specifically about trust, and again, we're talking about your romantic relationships, right? So in reference to your partners, to your spouses, why does it seem, again, on the outside looking in, why does it seem that it's rather tough for you guys to trust your mates, even if you've been in the relationship for years? Because as Merencia just brought up about the foundation, right? And you being able to be vulnerable. And even for the ladies, does this have something to do with mental health, specifically when it comes to our men not being able to trust? Is it our history? Like, what is actually going on with the trust in our relationships in the Black community? So first, let's let the men answer, and then please, ladies.
I think trust is a fickle thing. It's hard to earn and easy to break, right? And there's a level when you get into relationships, there's a level of expectation on both sides, and that foundation of trust is built on that level of expectation. I expect for you to behave a certain way to get my love, and in return, I give my love back to you. And when anytime that level of expectation isn't met, it creates a little smidget of, all right, can I trust this person to be this, right?
So that's
And
conditional love we're talking about?
it's conditional love we're talking about.
And expectations, it sounds like.
And expectations, right?
Mhm.
And I think that's where the expectation gets in the way of that unconditional love, because now in order to receive my love, I'm expecting to receive this, or I'm expecting to behave this, or I'm expecting this foundation of whatever that expectation is that has not been met in some form or fashion. And then that's when I start to question that trust. And because that very core essence starts to get triggered, it then goes into that emotional intelligence of us, where it's triggered to another thing that may have happened from childhood or for something else that we have not addressed, right? And then because we haven't addressed it, because we haven't, talk to somebody who's in the mental health profession or a therapist to help guide us through, because we often wait till the relationship is on the ending portion before we start to seek that therapy, instead of looking at it as a continuous thing, like exercise, like good water and drink, to help us to get to that closing chapter. We got to do it beforehand and start normalizing these conversations and talking about these triggers that come up that enable us not to trust. And that's where I'm gonna leave it at.
I mean, personally, for me, I think distrust is, when I look at it in terms of Black men in the community, I think distrust always, the genesis of that is surrounded around some sort of trauma that's happened
Right.
in their own personal life that has made it a point to now, like, put that kind of hedge of protection, or like T was saying, like, have these conditions before that trust will be given consistently at 100%. I know for me personally, like, over the last like several relationships that I was in, there was a lot of healing that needed to happen before I could get to a place of even trusting my partner. But here's the deeper truth. I didn't trust myself. Like, I didn't trust myself with my own choices. I didn't trust myself with my own decisions that I was making in my own life, and the outcome and the results of those decisions. So if I can't trust me to be able to do to show up in the way that I want to show up on a day-to-day basis, like, how in the hell can I trust my partner? And I just wanted to say one thing as it pertains to this trust this dance between trust and vulnerability, that really I wanted to talk about just for a quick second. Sometimes I think that women, and you guys can help me, ladies, if I'm off base here, but this is just what I interpret, is when women say that they want us to be more vulnerable, sometimes I think what they're really saying is they want us to be more vulnerable with them. And the reality of it is that because I believe myself to be a spiritual head of my household, there are certain things that I'm actually trying to protect you from. It doesn't mean that I'm not being vulnerable. It means that I may express that vulnerability to someone else. Like, as an example, like, I may talk to my father about something, the deep like troubles of my mind, that I don't want to bring that onto my wife's spirit, or like onto her in that capacity, that I need to talk to another man who understands what I'm going through, and I'm being vulnerable with him, so that I can show up, like, in my relationship the way that I would like to be. Now, that doesn't mean that that's the case every single time, and I don't think that it's healthy to every time you need to be vulnerable to go run off and not talk to your spouse or your partner. But what I'm really talking about is, because for me, I don't have issues of vulnerability. What I have issues about is understanding, okay, when is the time for me to be vulnerable with my partner, and when is the time where I need to keep this and kind of navigate this and allow this to kind of germinate on its own, and really let the process happen. you know, and I like what Merencia said about trust, because I think that that's what it does come down to. My partner has to trust that I am willing to be vulnerable with her. She needs to trust that, like, when I feel like it's necessary to be vulnerable with her, I'm going to do that. Like, I'm always going to do that. I'm going to look for that. I'm going to look for those opportunities to do that. And when it's not ideal, I may seek that vulnerability elsewhere, like with my brothers, or, you know, in God's word, or with a mentor or someone else, you know. And like, for me, like, that's kind of how I look at it.
And just to say, I mean, I think Mike and Merencia made some good points about trust that I want to just elaborate on. Like, one of the things I think is we got to understand is the way men and women think when it comes to trust, as we tend to hold on from make decisions based upon things that happened in our past, right? We tend to make decisions upon, like, we live in that moment and then move on to the next moment, while you'll find that most women will think about the future. Right. So when we just, a lot of times with trust, it takes time with us to really trust anything. It's kind of like when you broke up with your first girlfriend. Like, I remember when I broke up with my when I got my first divorce, it took me a while to even get into a relationship or marry my current wife. It took me 6 months to marry my first wife, but it took me like 3.5 years, because I need to work on myself, which is I need to understand how to trust again, and what are the things that I need to do to not to make that same mistake again, and then open myself to trust someone. So I mean, it's just kind of understanding that with men, we tend to make decisions based upon our past hurts, or our past joys, or our past loves, you know, and because we don't tend to navigate the world based upon, okay, well, what's going to happen in the future? You know, we base it based upon what happened then and what happened now. And that's bad, but at the same time too, we kind of built that way, where it takes a time, if we've been hurt before, or if we've been loved before, we kind of like gauge it based upon those things, as men.
I would honestly say that men and women base trust on their past relationships in their past. But one thing I want to say within that, and what I've seen more, I would say, as a clinician, is what is your relationship with your parents? That says a lot about your future relationships with whoever you have. Again, we're talking about like more like that love relationship, right? Right. And then also too, the first 5 years of a child's life is the most crucial years of their life, because there is a theorist named Erickson's theory, something like that. But what he says is during that time, it's either trust versus mistrust. So if a toddler is having issues trusting their own parent for food, shelter, water, keeping them safe, as well as they are growing up within those 5 years of a chaotic household, they're not learning how to form healthy relationships. They're not learning how to trust their parents. So if they have, in the first 5 years of their life, if they're not even learning what healthy trust looks like within their own parents' relationship, that literally forms or is the basis of future references. So for me personally, or within my profession, I would say it goes all the way back to childhood, and what type of relationship and trust do you have with your parents moving forward within your childhood.
And that's why it was important for me when I selected a spouse. It's what is the relationship like with their family and their parents? Because if it was off, I'm like, oh man, not in all cases. Something's gonna eventually crack. And I don't know if I could trust that person. Not that it didn't mean well, but I don't know if I could trust that person, because I seen what they went through. I'm like, I don't know if she could have a relationship with me.
Yeah.
So I want to say that even if you grew up in, like, let's say, like Merencia was saying, like that anxious avoidant attachment, like you don't really trust that the world is safe for you because it's not consistent. You can still grow and heal and develop different a more secure attachment. It's not like, oh, okay, well, this is what I experienced when I was 1 through 5, then it's all lost for me. Like, I'm gonna be stuck here forever. That's not how the human condition works. And William, I think that's great that what you did, but I just want to make sure that I say there are people who have grown up in the most heinous of environments that have done more work than people who have grown up with 2-parent homes. So I just want to make sure that our audience knows your past. Yes, I mean it dictates, it lays a foundation for a lot, but there are areas where you can heal and move through and learn different patterns of behavior and attachment styles and healthiness.
So from a mental clinician standpoint, is trust given or is it earned?
That's a good one.
How far in the relationship
Why can't
are
two
you?
things be true? Why can't two things be true?
I was thinking the same thing. I was thinking the same thing.
Two things can be true.
I was thinking the same thing.
How far in the relationship are you?
So
if you first start dating, then you have to build that trust. But by the time you get married, that trust.
But you still have, it's still an exchange though. Even if you're starting to date, there's still an exchange. If we're going on a date and you say you're going to pick me up at 6 and you show up at 7, that's a problem.
But what if I was getting ready, trying to look good for you?
Oh, you're not. Well, you could shoot a text.
I had to do my hair. I had to do my
doesn't matter.
hair, Walanda.
That doesn't matter. Communication. But you're showing me that, you might not be consistent. You might not be a man of your word.
Because I showed up late?
Without communication? Absolutely.
Is there a difference? Is there a difference in trust when it's given versus trust when it's earned? And how does that look when we're forming relationships in communities of color?
I mean, for me, fam, I give everybody 100% of my trust until you abuse it. Like, I don't. For me, I can't. For me personally, I can't live in a being super guarded and super skeptical of people's character and having these for me, I can't do that. Because for me, it's simpler for me to just give you 100% of my trust and then see what you do with it. I mean, it doesn't mean that I won't necessarily place a boundary in place to make sure that I'm not just, hey, here's $1 million, do what you will with it. Not like that, but clear about who I'm giving 100% of my trust to. But when I meet people, when I interact with people, I tend to look at them through the lens that this is an inherently good person until they show me otherwise. And I know that that's not normal. I know a lot of people look at it from a different point of view where they're more protected. I'm not saying that the way I do things is normal, but that for me, that's the way that I need to live. I can't live just looking at everybody with a certain level of skepticism and always looking at them through the scope of criticism or scrutiny. That for me.
Right. And I honestly really asked this question just because of the dynamics of our Black and brown communities, of how we relate and work, and for lack of better terms, deal with each other. Right. I don't want to use the term deal because that's like a negative connotation, but how we interact with each other.
And I think it also depends, prime example, I'm the total opposite. I'm gonna be real, the total opposite. I think it's just my life experiences. I think it's what I see, what I hear as a therapist, as a social worker. So my lens is skewed. So for me, it's I trust you, but not 100%. The more I hang out with you, the more I build my relationship with you, the more I'm vulnerable, then you can have all my trust. But in the beginning, I'll trust you with some distance. And then the more I hang out, again, the more we're making that strong relationship, then I'll give you that 100%. So yeah, like Mike said, every person's different.
I think there's levels to it too.
Yeah, that's very true. Very true.
I think, well, I was going to say real quick, I know Marshaun, you have to move on, but I was going to say, you may inherently, like Walanda said, trust that you're going to pick me up on time, or trust that you're not going to do anything too crazy or stupid. But, as time goes on, is this someone I could trust that I can, if someone's gonna be a future wife? Is this a man I could trust that can lead me into our goals that we have set together? And as a husband, is this someone I could trust that can help, raise our kids and, support me? Those types of things I think take trust. When it comes to the real, is this someone that has my back? Because I trust if you're gonna pick me up on time, but do I trust that your intent and purpose is pure or in the right interest towards me? And I think over time, you learn that from that person. Once you get that intent and purpose isn't pure for you, then it's like, I got to move on.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it kind of the environment we live in currently, it even contributes to a lot of people having to learn to trust people they don't even know. Like social media, we have the internet, we have a whole other world like I don't understand. I mean, for me, I could never see myself marrying somebody online who I never met before. Right? I mean, just marrying somebody, meeting somebody online, never meeting them in person, nothing, and just I can never see myself doing that. But there's people who are doing that today, and that's a different level of trust that, I mean, for me, I don't understand. Right? But I'm not judging it, but at the same time, too, for me, it's kind of like I don't understand that level of trust. So because I have to understand that person, I have to see that person's body language, I have to be able to see that person. That's Merencia, important family. If you don't know the person's environment, family structure that it came from, you don't know some of the things that might pop up later on that might affect your relationship. So it's all about the different environment.
And I see both lenses of the coin, because I see where in our dynamic of the Black community, where this could be, all right, me as a Black man, I'm going into a society where society innately doesn't trust me, the Black man, in all these different systems that we navigate, right? So innately that creates this most social emotional need and disconnect where I don't fully trust myself, because I'm always navigating a society that doesn't trust me. So I need this woman that I'm going to get with to have some type of trust in me, and that help me build the trust in myself, so we can navigate this world together. But then on the other hand, if I have this cynical woman who doesn't trust off the bat, right? And I have to earn this trust, but I haven't gotten there yet. Or let's say if she opens up and she's fully trusting and she makes a lot of decisions that are like, oh wait, I can't trust you to manage these things because I don't trust your decision making. So I'm gonna micromanage you, that causes this rift in our relationship. There's so many different tangibles that go in there. So I'm always looking at these different layers from mental health and social emotional standpoint of views. What's the better of the two, and how do we navigate this to build healthy relationships in our community? That's a question.
Oh, I was just kind of letting it sizzle.
We're waiting for that.
Letting it sizzle, dog. I was trying to let it marinate a little bit. You know what I mean? That was kind of good, fam. That was juicy. I
guess for me, I don't feel like there's a universal answer, right?
Yeah, that's good.
Relationships are built in intimate moments. They're not built community to community. So just for me, I just don't think there's a universal answer to that question. And it's something that you kind of work out in building dialogue and crossing those lines between our communities and having those conversations. But that's just me.
I appreciate that.
Well, I mean, I think you're spot on, Walanda. It starts first from recognizing, like, hey, all right, there seems to be a disconnect with the way that we're operating from a micro sociological standpoint and a macro sociological. I mean, me and T went on Clubhouse a couple weeks ago, specifically posing a question to Black men about entrepreneurship, success, and cooperation within the community, that stirred a lot of ruffled some feathers, but it also stirred up some good, healthy conversation. And the whole idea is, we want to get into a position of being in more cooperation with each other. And I think going back to like family dynamics or even home, like historical dynamics, systemically speaking, we've all been conditioned as Black people and people of color, like to look at each other as competition. we have the natural propensity rather than like, and I think that's part of the reason why I'm so adamant about just, sort of faithfully trusting people until they abuse that trust, because I have found in my experience that doing this kind of dance where I'm like constantly like analyzing you and figuring out whether you should earn my trust, for me is just too exhausting. And I find that like I would much rather take the risk of getting burned potentially by you doing something stupid, and then I really learn about your character, than to navigate our relationship. Because sometimes, like T said, maybe me trusting you 100% is exactly what you need to finally let that guard down, to be able to feel like you can be yourself. I had a conversation with a young man earlier today, and that's what he said when he was asking me about something about coaching costs and stuff. And I kept telling him to stop worrying about that. And he couldn't believe that I kept saying that. And he kept thinking that I was trying to get one over on him, until finally I broke through. And he had a moment and he cried right on the Zoom, in our Zoom conversation. And he was just like, I've never, he's like, Mike, I don't meet a lot of people like this, and sometimes that's what the person needs. They need to know that, what, man, you don't have to earn my trust. You don't have to do something, in order to get that. Because as Black people, we've been living with that narrative our whole entire lives. We've been wearing the burden of our skin our whole lives, where we feel like we have to do something extra in order to gain that approval. And so I just don't want to live like that when it comes to the way I operate, and I find for me, it's worked. I've gotten burned a few times, but generally speaking, I haven't really been burned that much. You're on mute, fam.
All right, Marshaun, go ahead.
Okay, yes. Okay, so as we thought the conversation was going to be super juicy, but we need to move forward.
Right.
We've only answered 2 questions out of 5. So here's what I'm going to say. We're probably only going to get to 1 more for the fellas, and then we're going to jump into the questions for the ladies. So you're only going to hear 1 more. So we're going to jump into the last one for the gentlemen. And of course, because the conversation is free flowing, please jump in if you have an opinion. And then I guess at the top of the hour, we will move on to the questions for the ladies. So you guys kind of talked about masculinity just a little bit in here. You're kind of throwing it in here a little bit. So I want to speak about, how does your male masculinity show up and or affect the way you show up in your relationship, specifically with your woman? Go ahead, Walanda. Sit up.
CJ.
Sit up now.
That's a good question. That's a good question.
Come on, big bro. Come with
it. How does a man's masculinity show up because I'm going to repeat the question, okay? So
show up or affect your relationship with your lady. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that is all, as Merencia kind of like said it before. It comes from how we were raised as kids. Because I mean, when as a child, most of the time, how we deal with relationships when we get married, because at the end of the day, 90%, I would say 90% of our decisions in marriage come from what we saw in the past. A lot of it, like how our parents interacted with each other, how at the same time too, they dealt with problems, how they dealt with, they talked about finances, how they talked about relationships, how you see, because I mean, there's also, I mean, and we take the good and the bad. Now, as a man in masculinity, we learn it a lot from our parents, our male figures in life, like our fathers, and at the same time too, at the end of the day, I have learned, for me, and I'll just speak for me, I've learned to take the good from what I saw and eliminate the bad. It's kind of like understanding the things that because at the end of the day, like being wrong or making a mistake is okay, right? But it's hard to do that when you're married, because it affects a lot of things, and failure in marriage means that at the end of the day, as a man, we take it a little bit tougher. I don't know, but we just take it a little bit harder when it comes to failure in our marriage. Now, how we get up from that and how we move forward is and it's kind of like we tend to like that's where I think we tend to understand, like, okay, well, when we should really become use our masculinity. Like for instance, and what I'm trying to basically say, there's some we call toxic masculinity, right? And that's something that that's a new thing that I've heard like in the past like 2 years. And the things that we always used to think were okay, well, it was okay to be a man, like masculine, like walk around with our chest up, I'm the man of the house. A lot of times that doesn't go across well when it comes to really building trust in a relationship and building a family. Sometimes I've learned just having teenagers that sometimes I have to humble myself. I have to learn how to just take it, because being a parent and being a father, and most people with parents here, it's a thankless job, right? At the end of the day, and being a man, we always push for respect, so you can't, and then you have to find that balance, because if you saw that in the past, it was your way or the highway, in your household when you were growing up. It's going to be hard to express that in today, because you have to find that middle ground where a lot of times I have to find myself listening, just staying quiet, and more than doing anything more than else, to shut up and listen, because there might be something behind that outburst or that something that's happening in that person's life, or that child's life.
I have to say, for me, I had to humble myself, because I thought as a man, something was broken in the house, I had to fix it. I'm not a handy dude. That's not my thing. I couldn't tell you all about cars. And I realized, like, I'm the type of dude, I'm like, if I don't know how to do it, I'll just call someone that knows how to do it, because I want to make sure it's done.
And you're being vulnerable. You're
right.
You're being honest, and you're being real.
But this is the thing I have to learn. This is the thing I have to learn, that I have to check myself. There were some household things about fixing stuff my wife could do, I did not know how to do. And we both were kind of looking at each other like, how come you don't know how to do it? And I'm just kind of like,
My God.
I don't know. I mean, if it's something simple like fixing the toilet or whatever, I could do that. But if it's something like, really gotta put some shelves together and do this, I'm like, I'm making distance on this. And so I thought that was a hit on my masculinity, because I didn't know how to do all that. Until I kind of, as time went on, I had to realize, like, you know what? It's okay, I don't know how to do it. It's okay for me to learn how to do these things. It's okay that I don't know.
Right.
It was also okay for me to call someone who is an expert on this. But look, hey, babe, I couldn't tell you on this, but I do know someone who does know about this. Let's call them over to take a look at this, because I just want to make sure it's done right.
That's awesome, though. They can be vulnerable and say that.
To me, that was a hit for me initially, because there was just, at 25, I got married. There was a lot of stuff I did not know how to do.
Mm-hmm.
I think that brings me into the conversation of ego and pride. Is the biggest thing that I had to check myself on. I remember even when quick story, when I first, me and my girl were first dating, she knew how to change the oil, do the tires, stuff I didn't know how to do. And then I remember trying to, like, let me be the man and do it one day. Like, oh, baby, you can't fight. Get over it. Get out of here. And so that ego and pride really will take hold of you. And I think one other thing that Clinton kind of alluded to is listening, right? I'm gonna say women are better listeners. Men, we well, okay, all right. I'm gonna say me. Well, I see Walanda shaking her head. My woman is definitely a better listener than I am. I think I was listening to try to fix problems, listening to be a risk mitigator instead of really just listening to understand. And in that, I could be a better risk mitigator, because I'll listen to hear what's not being said, right, and read in between the lines, because sometimes I don't need to fix everything. Sometimes I need to just pay attention to the details of what's not being said in that conversation, and the whatever we try and get to, it works smoother. But I'm so busy trying to listen to respond. I was like, oh, she said this, I'm gonna respond this way, right?
Right.
So that's what I would say.
Now we got a good comment from one of our guests saying, I don't like the fact that people have begun to call masculinity toxic. I don't see anything wrong with a man being masculine. That's actually what's actually toxic is the fact that masculinity has now been made to mean the equivalent of qualities such as emotionless, macho, and non-compromising, among other things. It's pretty I bring that, I like that just from the standpoint that for me, like how my masculinity shows up is this concept of servant-based leadership and humility. For me are like the two kind of principles that I keep trying to push on myself every single day.
But I don't see that as a masculine thing. That could be a feminine thing too.
That's my point. That's my point, fam. Is that like I don't like we get into this concept of masculine versus feminine, and I just think of it as human traits. It's a human thing. Like I don't think it's masculine that you have a woman who understands how to do like handy things no more than think it's feminine that you have a man who knows how to do hair. Like it's this idea of gender roles and gender norms and what's appropriate and what's not appropriate is the thing that I'm personally I'm trying to get myself personally. Now, again, I'm only using I statements. I'm not speaking for anyone else except for myself that I'm trying to break. Something that me and my partner have talked about is like, babe, like I don't like when we go to family functions because her family does come from that very traditional masculine kind of standpoint where it's like, the wife is supposed to be fixing the plate and the wife's supposed to be doing this and doing that and doing this. And I've told her that like, I don't want to live like that. Like it doesn't matter who's doing our daughter's hair. It doesn't matter who's getting things done. It doesn't matter who's washing dishes, who's not washing dishes, whatever's going on. It's just about, for me, it's about me having made this commitment to serve and to really, for me, biblically, to present you to God without blemish. That is what I am trying to devote my life to doing. And whatever that looks like on a day-to-day basis, like I'm all in. I'm all in to do that. To me, that's what being a man is all about.
Clinton, I know you're going to clarify the toxic masculinity. I just want to say this real quick. I learned this from Mike Dunn 1. So that's from Michael Dunn Sr., not Jr. I had a conversation with Mike's dad maybe about 7-8 years ago about the role of a man in relationship. And he said to me, and this is what helped me with the masculinity part. He said to me, a man should be whatever he needs to be at that moment in the relationship. Whatever he needs to be.
Right.
To be at that moment. So if he has to be the fix-it guy, the repair guy, what we deem as masculine, he needs to do that. But if he has to take on certain roles that you would say consider are more likely from the wife, then he needs to do that too. So that helped clarify. I'm like, oh, you know what? I can't just think I'm a man just for just doing just one part. I'm a man if I look at the situation and say, okay, I need to put myself in a position to make the right decision for my family.
Right. Yeah, and then just to clarify, I mean, toxic masculinity is exactly what Mike was just elaborating to. Basically, it's trying to push roles upon people based upon gender. And as men, we grew up in sometimes in families where, especially if we grew up in I would say a religious family, you'll find that there was roles that were put upon women, and that was overlooked for men. Right. Even you'll find that there was a time where people would say that, hey, women can become preachers. Right. And that's something that you'll find that happen in the church a lot. That's kind of that was imparted upon a lot of generations. So, I mean, it's breaking down those type of stereotypes, because I believe that having daughters, I want them to grow up in a world where they have to fit into a mold to be able to actually be successful. I want them to be able to do anything they desire, just like what my sons are going to be able to do anything they desire and excel at it. you know, and that's the main thing is with toxic masculinity. It's something that a lot of us had to address, and for me, I had to address it too, because sometimes I would think that, you know, like if housework has to be done, that's the rule that a woman should actually embrace. But at the end of the day, for me, if the dishes are not washed or the clothes or the laundry's not done, you have to pick up that slack. It's just basically how it works. I mean, and I would say in a marriage, it's a team, right? Where you see weakness, you got to be strong. Or where she sees weakness, she got to be strong. It's a team balancing out each other. So at the end of the day, there's no room for roles that everybody should have to play, because we all have an ability to learn how to do something if we don't know how to do it. You know what I'm saying? It's like we limit ourselves as human beings. Like, no, we can, even if it was told that we shouldn't do it, we can learn how to do it. So, I mean, it's kind of like there's no excuse to say, well, okay, well, this is the role that somebody should play, or this is the role that's, now being a father and being a mother is two different things. But at the same time too, we should be able to learn how to at least pick up the slack or do both. You know what I'm saying? And that creates no room for toxic masculinity.
Thank you, reader, or whoever is watching with that. Masculinity in itself is not toxic. It is the harm that is done because you are masculine. So if I have a right to sleep with you because you dress like a certain type of person, or it's the harm that's done in it. It's not masculinity in itself. It's when I feel like I have a privilege because I'm a man, and I'm gonna take those rights as a man and do harm to you. So I just want to make sure that that's clear, that it's not that masculinity is toxic. It's the way in which it is used that causes harm to other people, specifically women. That's the part that makes it toxic.
And I have a question about that too. Also, probably more geared towards what Walanda is. People say may look at masculinity as toxic and femininity as weak. Would you agree to that?
That people have that opinion?
Right. So when we say toxic masculinity, we look at, you know, if you're a man taking, like you said, you know, you feel like you can take advantage of this situation that's toxic masculinity because you're a male. I'm gonna take advantage of this individual. But some people may look at, if you're a woman and you're feminine, you may look at it as you're more likely to be taken advantage of, which femininity, in my opinion, doesn't mean you're taken advantage of. It just means that you have a lot of traits that men desire in a woman.
Help me out, Merencia. Yeah. I don't.
We don't know where to go with that question, so we're gonna go to Marshaun, and Marshaun, take us into the ladies.
Moving on.
Use the, you know, play us mess, play us mess up.
Moving on.
So I know we're a little over, but what I would like to do before we move on to the ladies' questions, gentlemen, if you can make it very brief in one sentence, what advice would you give to the younger generation of men when it comes to showing up better in your romantic relationships?
Iron out your relationship with God first before you decide to start dating women.
Clinton?
Romantic relationships, I would say just be present in the moments, you know, just make sure that you are present in the moments.
Say that one more time. That is everything to a woman. Present in the moments.
In the moments, yes. I've learned that. Present in the moments.
Okay, Taryell?
I would say start with self, right? And if you haven't done so already, you know, prioritize your mental health, see a therapist, do all those things that create a better you. A lot of people think that, you know, self-care, you know, that's not important. I need to care for this woman. I need to care for this. But self-care is really caring for the other person. When you prioritize self-care, then you show up better for those relationships, for those loved ones, and for the people that are relying on you.
And William.
I agree with everything you guys said. I would say before you decide to pursue a romantic relationship, make sure you have the ability to take care of yourself first, meaning ability to, have your own shelter, food, have the ability to take care of yourself. Because if you can't take care of yourself first, how could you take care of a spouse or children that you may have after that? So I would say that would be a top priority for a man.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Thank you. Okay. So now we're going to move into the questions for the ladies. We're going to do the segment just like we did for the gentlemen. The ladies will start, and then the gentlemen can jump in with any follow-up questions or even rebuttals. Let's keep it fluid like we did in the last segment. Okay. So we brought up trust for the men. So ladies, when do you begin to trust your man unconditionally? Or does that ever happen?
Never.
And of course, hold on. we said ladies. And then also, is there something mental health wise with going either way, either trusting or not?
That's deep.
So, yeah, I will say personally, I don't believe in the term unconditional trust, or like the only person that I even struggle with that I trust in that degree is God. Because people are human and people are flawed. And so the Bible clearly says, and I'm not saying this is like, don't trust no man. I'm not saying that, but there's wisdom in that, because if I am trusting you to the point where I'm dependent on you to do everything or take care of whatever, there might be a day where you like, I don't feel like it because I am sick, whatever, I just don't believe, this is my personal thing. I don't believe in that unconditional, I'm gonna trust you for everything, about everything, because humans are so inherently flawed. I can't remember the second question. So if you can repeat that, Marshaun.
maybe I'll answer the second one because you laid it out.
Yeah, go ahead.
So clear, Walanda, and I agree with you wholeheartedly, because we're flawed, right? Like, we're not perfect. So can you ask the second question one more time, please?
I got a question for the ladies too once you get done.
So I was basically asking, do we ever trust them unconditionally? But then also, is there something in the mental health realm to say that we should trust unconditionally or not?
To be honest with you, I've never even heard of the term like trusting unconditionally. So I guess like what Walanda was saying, or what you were saying earlier, like it just really comes down to vulnerability and trusting your partner. I think that's just, again, like trust and vulnerability for me really goes hand in hand. And if I trust my spouse, I feel secure with my spouse, that I can be vulnerable, which means that I can have a broader lens of empathetic love and appreciation. So if I know like maybe he's projecting because he has a busy workday and he's been stressed out, because I trust him and I know of what he's going through, that I can have that empathetic outlook of what's going on, if that makes sense, when it comes to like trusting of what's going on within that situation. Does that make sense?
But I will say mental health wise, like you have, and I am probably butchering this without looking at my DSM, but when you have people, there is a diagnoses that if you're coming in hot, like I trust, like I met you today and I trust you with my house, my kids, my dog.
Yeah.
That is more than likely if she or he is coming in hot like that,
Mm-hmm.
it's probably a mental health issue there. And I feel like it's a personality disorder, Merencia. Again, I don't have my book in front of me, and I don't know the DSM back to front. But personality, there's a personality disorder. You come in and you're just like, I'm all in, like, hey, that's
and I
go the other
personally,
way.
yeah, and I personally know somebody like that, and I think that this person really has an intellectual disability. I think that, you know, this person may have had trauma in her life where this person has always been on like cloud nine and everything's nice and roses and sweet, where like this person just trusts exactly what you're talking about. So I feel mentally, if somebody has blocked the trauma of whatever happened to them and they don't want to deal with it, then they put up this facade or this like roses and everything's nice to not really deal with the hurt and pain, if that makes sense. So I definitely feel like it is some type of like hurt or some type of healing that they need to deal with. But by thinking, oh, okay, you know, if I'm naive and I just allow this person to, you know, do A, B, and C to me, and you don't see that there's a problem, then there's something going on upstairs that you probably needs to get, you know, checked out on.
Go ahead, Mike. What's your question?
Oh, okay. First of all, ladies, thank you for your vulnerability and your share. But I got a hard hitting question for y'all, because you're both mental health therapists. Do you believe that you're being in the trenches in this mental health war on a day-to-day basis with the people you serve has left you guys a little bit jaded about the ideas that we are talking about in this conversation today?
In what part of it? Because we've been talking about it a lot.
So we talking about right now, we're talking about the topic of trust, right? And I've heard both of you say this a couple of times, where because of your practice, because of your clients, because of like the things that you've seen, the things that you've heard, I can't help but ask myself, I wonder if that is caused a little bit of jadedness when it comes to your own personal relationships and the way that you view them and the way that you navigate them and the way that you go about them. Because I'm not a mental therapist, so I don't know all these dark things that have happened from what you guys have actively seen on a day-to-day basis, being in the trenches. You know, I've heard some of the horror stories, but
are you talking about like comments like people are inherently flawed?
Yeah, or like, you know, I mean, we're hearing them. We are hearing them right now on the show. I don't need to sit here and unveil all of the comments. But as I'm listening to the comments, I'm pulling a T right now. I'm listening to what's not being said, and I'm reading between the lines, and I'm navigating, and I'm listening. So I'm just curious.
Me, Mike. Don't assess me, Mike. Don't assess me.
See, that's the language. See, that's the language we don't know. Assess.
But I will say this. I don't think therapists are human. Mm-hmm. We have our own family of origin stuff that we have to work through. We have our own relational trauma and childhood trauma that we have to, you know, learn how to work through too. And I wouldn't say that I will say, me personally, I'm not jaded. I will say, as a professional who works with couples and works with individuals who want to be in a couple, I feel like I understand more of the work that's required. And so for me, you know, you count up the cost. Like, you don't just go like, I'm gonna build a house today and I don't have any tools. No, I need to count up the costs and see if this is a person that I want to do the work with, which is not a jade. It's more of a like, because this is going to be a lot of work.
So it's giving you a different perspective and kind of an air of caution of really understanding the full.
Of being intentional.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. I feel you. As a financial professional, I definitely have considered like the financial situation of my partner before going into those situations, because I understand that from a different perspective. So I feel you on that. Thank you for that.
You checked some credit reports before you got involved?
Hell yeah, I checked some credit reports.
It's the same as a mental health. Look, it's the same as a mental health therapist.
You darn right I did. I said, hey, so what's your debt to income ratio? What's your situation?
Oh my.
What kind of derogatories are we dealing with?
Hey, I have a question for you ladies really quickly. So
Can I answer my question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. So yes, please.
No, you're good. Wait, let me say this little sarcasm real quick to Mike. That's the equivalent to a therapist, and I'm not saying I've done this in the past. The equivalent to checking a report is checking a criminal background of somebody.
Y'all know
Lord have mercy.
Y'all know me in these streets. Y'all know my background.
That's equivalent. That's equivalent to checking some credit score. We can check some criminal background.
The Lord said I've been forgiven.
Lord knows. Go ahead, Miss Henson.
The Lord has also paid our debts.
Right. Right. I had to just put that out there real quick, you know. But me personally, I would say mine is more internal, like personal experiences. When it comes to like relationships and trust. But I will say when it comes to if I meet, or in the past, not anymore, but like if I meet somebody to date, like Walanda said, my assessment, my lens is different. So if he's saying things that aren't really making sense, things ain't adding up, you know, if he's like, oh, let me come over and it's only the first day I'm meeting him, like just things like that, I'm like, I'm seeing like more red flags because of my field of work. But I would say more than anything, just like my own personal experiences than my field.
When it comes to this lens of trust, because when you guys were talking, and especially Walanda, when you said like how people are inherently flawed, like my trigger in my brain always like, well, people are beautifully flawed too. You know, it depends on the vision of how we're seeing it. You know, it
come on, drop that bomb, baby. Drop that. Hey, spit that game, baby. Let them know.
But see, but that's the same as like, is your life half empty or half full, right?
Yeah.
And that's perspective. That's all perspective, you know. I mean, I sorry to cut you off. Go ahead, Taryell.
No. Go ahead. What was you about to say?
No, because what I'm saying, it's like I'll even go take it a step further and say it's like we all are human beings and we all have some screwed up stuff in us, right? We all. It's just who we are, right? The problem with it is that the lens we bring and we see things through is that the lens that we have learned to hide those things, right? I mean, better than the other person. So I believe like just understanding that we are all inherently flawed and we all are work in progress. We all have to approach things with careful, you know, we just have to, because and just to give you all a big example, right? We just had an election and half the population of the United States voted for Donald Trump, right? So think about it. It's like, people are, they see things through their perspective and they don't see sometimes through things of how they're hurting somebody else, right? So just understanding that makes life a lot easier to handle, because it makes you understand that people, you don't try to change people, you change yourself first, right? You don't go in a relationship expecting certain things from people unless you have actually try to account for your flaws first, because it's kind of like asking somebody to change all the time and then you're not expecting them to ask you to change because you think that you have no flaws, right? So a lot of times it's all about, I believe in relationships, we gotta, that trust and that vulnerability and all that stuff combines when we can understand, okay, well, this person's a work in progress. I have to account for myself, you know, and I have to approach it where, what is it about me that this person wants me to change first before I can approach that person and say, hey, you know, maybe you might want to work on some other things that I don't like, you know? So I think that's just my opinion and my thought.
All right, Marshaun, take us on to the next question.
Okay, thank you for that, Taryell. But hold on, because I have a question myself for the ladies, and then we'll move on to the next question right after this. So, have you both become desensitized? And I hope I'm asking this question right. Have you become desensitized about how healthy a relationship can now be based off of what you heard and seen from your patients?
I wouldn't say, just because, again, as a believer in Christ, I know how God has really moved my clients. I know how much God has healed my clients, and I'm talking about traumatic experiences. Things that you see in a movie is what I hear on a weekly basis sometimes. So because I know the power of God, and I know the power of what God can do when you really accept him wholeheartedly, that I still
Your mic went out.
Oh yeah, okay.
Your mic went out. Your mic went out.
So while
can you hear me now?
There she goes. There, go ahead.
Okay. And I'm like, my significant other says I'm such a care bear. So like, I have that in me, right? Like, I feel just because of who I am and in the field, and again, seeing it firsthand, how people have really came like full circle, I would disagree. Like, I think that people can still, have a life of health, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually.
Miss Marshaun, my answer is going to be no, I'm not desensitized.
Okay, perfect.
I love Walanda.
This what happens when you trust, right? In the process.
Taryell, okay. Okay, let's move on to the most popular, very popular topic of submission. This always comes up, every relationship topic. When I'm on Clubhouse, submission always comes up. So the question for the ladies is, do you feel that you should just submit to your man because he's the man, or for other reasons? Or is it a combination of things? Come on, Clinton.
I'm good.
No, I would love to hear from the men as well. But for me personally, and I'm not going to go down like a rabbit hole, but I think in some areas of your marriage, I think that's a great thing to do, right? When it comes to submission. But like Mike said, like that's a conversation for you to have, to like, look, like, one, what a submissive looks like, right? Because each man and each woman looks different. And like Mike said, like, if it's not about gender roles, right? So if I know that my spouse is going to help me out and I don't need to feel like I have to do everything, or, you know what I mean? Then I don't know. For me personally, I think it just depends on the man. It depends on your relationship and your communication level with him. But to answer your question, yes, I think that there is some areas in your marriage where submissive is okay.
I think one of the things that I always have a conversation when it comes to the men is, instead of worrying about your wife submitting, why don't you just concentrate on being a man worth submitting to? Because that's, I mean, and I'm not speaking about this like, except from my own experience of watching my father for the last 35, 40 plus years, lead from a position of humility. And for those who know my mother, that woman she has a mind of her own when it comes to marching to the beat of her own drum. And I have seen it like supernaturally when it is really time for my father to take a position of leadership and really do something for the prosperity of the family. My mom, without a moment's hesitation, falling in line and doing what's necessary for the family, Because
she trusts him, and she trusts that he is the leader. She trusts that you're going to go to God for the decisions. So like you said, if your wife trusts you with decisions and where you're coming from and who you're going to when it comes to making decisions, if you need that second person's opinions or prayers, then it's easier for your spouse to submit, step back, and say, okay, babe, I trust you. Go ahead. If you feel like this is what's right for our marriage or for our families, then go right ahead. And I'll even tell everybody, I know God is still working on my ability to understand with me about to get married. Like, it's okay for me to let go of all that independence I've always had my whole adult life, and to know, okay, if I if I'm working, if I'm doing A, B, and C, things are going to get done. My bills are going to get paid. And now it's like, okay, it's all right for me to step back, relinquish some of that, knowing that this is a team effort moving forward.
The last thing I'll say to that is this: a real man will never let you say that you ever have to. That's my point. You don't have to change anything that you don't want to change. Like, that's like, I'm like, what my father has taught me, watching him and him having these dialogues, what he has taught me is allow your wife to be whatever she wants to be, and allow her to arrive at the decisions and the process in which she needs to arrive at the decisions and the process. And just, what does it say biblically? It doesn't say lead your wife. It doesn't say dominate your wife. It doesn't say instruct your wife. It doesn't say any of those things. It says love your wife like Christ loved the church. And that to me is what I personally, every single day when I'm in my quiet time, talking to God about what I need to do as a man, like who's going into marriage, he constantly tells you that just love her, just love her, just love her, just love her. That's it. That's it. Whatever that looks like every day, allow her and trust her to be able to arrive at the decisions that she needs to change when she decides she needs to change them. And I think if, as men, if we did that more often, I think that we may have potentially better households where our wives would, I guess, for lack of a better word, submit at the times where it's necessary, because she understands that my husband's not asking me to do this for anything other than the fact that this needs to happen in order for us to move forward.
So I'm gonna play devil.
No, wait, hold on, bro. Hold on. I just wanna reference Ephesians 5:21, which says, and further submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. I believe it's toxic masculinity to say, well, I'm the man, so submit. I don't have to love you like Christ loved the church. I don't have to respect your opinion. I don't have to hear what you have to say about things. You just should submit to me because I am the man. That's toxic. Okay, Taryell.
Thank you for that.
Real quick,
You know what?
That goes both ways.
Let me play devil's advocate real quick.
She did a mic drop.
She did a mic drop.
We rebuke the Bible on this show.
Okay, sorry. Let me change up my choice of words. Let me offer a different synopsis scenario. If my significant other says inherently people are flawed, and also if my significant other says that you have to earn my trust, so you haven't gotten to that place yet, how do you discern when to submit and when not to submit? How do we begin to start to get into that conversation where we get to a point where we can both submit when the time is right for each other?
You go to marriage counseling.
What did she say?
You go to marriage counseling, premarital counseling, couples counseling, and have those conversations that need to be had. For real. I'm dead serious. Like, there's no like, okay, well, let's try to figure this out. If you guys are stuck, that's why you have therapists. That's why you have counselors.
Okay.
I love that. Thank you for saying that.
All right.
And I'll just say just to lighten up the mood and everything, I'll just say I like times when my wife is dominant. There's times when I would say, hey, I think that's sexy. She being dominant is very sexy sometimes. She taking the head and leading and doing certain things. That is sometimes we need that as men. We need to see that as men sometimes, because a lot of times that helps us in understanding that we don't have to take on that role all the time. We don't have to always be the leader, because at the end of the day, as I said, strengths and weaknesses. If you see where she's weak, you become strong. And then if you see then she'll understand, hey, where you're weak, she'll become stronger. And that's how it works too in relationships. It's a team effort.
You know what? With relationships, when it comes to submissive part, it's a very sensitive subject. And I think it's because when you say submit, you say that I'm weak. like I'm the weaker person, I'm devalued. And I think what a lot of people look at in the long term, when I say the history of relationships, is usually it was the man who, you know, brought in the money, and a lot of times with the money became decisions on what you did with the money and decisions that you make in life. I agree with Walanda that doing marriage counseling and therapy is key and vital to every relationship, because then you have a third party to say, you know, what you're saying right there doesn't make quite sense. What you're saying right there does make quite sense. You guys need to figure this out together. But I personally believe that before you get married, you do need to have that marriage counseling, but that decision has to be made going into the marriage that, okay, as the man, if I'm gonna be making most of the money, and if, you know, whoever I'm marrying agrees to the same thing, I'm going to be leading our family. I'm going to make sure whatever goals that we have together, that I'm going to get us there. It doesn't mean that the wife sometimes can't lead in certain things or make certain decisions on certain situations. But a lot of times when it comes to the whole overall success and goals of the family, that decision has to be made up front. And then going to counseling to figure out, you know, if it's on track. Are you on track to meeting those goals that you guys have with the family? So I think when submitting, we think of weaker. Wives don't want to think of, okay, if I'm submitting, I'm the weaker person. Or the man says, okay, if I'm submitting to my wife in this situation, I'm stupid and I don't understand. One last thing I do want to say is, I think it's okay for sometimes for wives to disagree with their husbands on certain decisions. Don't be disrespectful about the disagreement. And I think a lot of guys don't want to feel like they're disrespected when whoever they're married to is disagreeing with them.
I certainly hope I would not want to marry a person that agree with every decision that I like. What part of the game, bruh? Like, y'all know my past. I am not capable of making the correct decision every single.
Right.
Absolutely not.
That part.
Right? What? So you just like, you just gonna go along with the whole ride. We go drive right off the cliff, and you just go put your hands up and be like, "Hey, like, you gotta speak up."
That's actually a
And it goes
perfect
back
segue.
to boundaries.
Oh, no, go finish what you have to say, Merencia, then we're gonna move on. Go ahead. No, please.
Oh, no, it was something quick. I was just saying it's, you know, it's about boundaries. You know, like God will give you a significant other that God knows he needs you just as much as you need him. So if you know that your partner can be, I don't know, going off the limb and want to do fun things and like, I want to do A, B, or C, and you're like, let's reevaluate it. Let's see if it's safe. Like, let's see if we could really do it. And then they could be like, okay, babe, yeah, you made some good points. Let's do this instead, or let's change it up a little bit where it makes work. And it's, you know, it's a little bit more feasible. But yeah, like we talked about a couple minutes ago, like having someone that always agrees with you, that's something's wrong. Like that isn't, you need to have a mind of your own. And to me, that would feel like you have lack of confidence within yourself as a woman. If you don't feel confident enough for you to actually speak up and say something to your spouse.
Right. And I believe that also is the challenge. You need somebody in your relationship who's going to challenge you. I mean, somebody telling you that you can do better at something, or that means that person wants to see you do better. You know, it's like, if we all confident, and comfortable with who we are, embracing somebody who's telling us to do something differently or change something about ourselves, or like means that person wants to see us do better, you know. So we need iron sharpens iron, basically. You need somebody who in a relationship who is going to challenge you to be better than the version you were last year, yesterday, the day before, right? And it's not like a nagging thing. It's just that and you just need to take it upon yourself to be inspired to actually please that person by not showing submission too, you know.
Okay, so speaking of submission in a different way, so it sounds like we feel like the men kind of set the tone, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like men kind of set the tone in the relationship. And if that's true, I see you shaking your head, so I'm gonna give you a moment. If that's true or not, right? Then how do we shift the tone, especially if he's having like a bad day, right? Or if your needs are not being met, if it's true that he sets the tone.
Yeah, let's unpack that first part first, Marshaun, because you came in with a trick and loaded right there.
Yeah, let's use that because
I like that. That was a little double negative and everything on.
so for
Go
me,
ahead, Merencia.
so for me personally, I have a very strong personality, like my significant other knows that I have. And because of our foundation of being best friends, I know him so well. Like he doesn't have to say anything. And I know if his mood is off, if he's stressed, like how his day is. So I could set the tone in the morning, like, babe, you know what? Let's just pray. You know what I mean? Like I can see it all over your face. Let's pray. Let's set the tone for the day. Let's get into the word. Let's pray. So again, you know, if you really know your spouse, or if you feel like something's off as the woman, and if you're confident and just like I am, and I'm already having that, you know, that discernment, I don't think nothing there. No, I don't see anything wrong with a strong woman saying, you know what, let's pray. Or you know what, you had a stressed out day, let's go out to dinner. And you're setting the tone for the evening, for the day. But then if you feel like he wants to set the tone because he feels like there's something I need, then it's that yin and yang. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. And again, like, I don't think it's just one-sided. Mike,
I agree with Merencia, and my question is, what does that mean, set the tone for the relationship?
Yeah, that's what I was really going back on too. I was trying to figure that out, but
it means pray for him.
So
Miss Marshaun.
Yes, when I'm listening to women talk, they basically kind of go along with whatever is happening in the relationship, or even during the day or night, whatever. But just when they're with their men. So if, for instance, if your man is crabby or being rude or whatever, needs his moment, but doesn't really know how to express that, maybe she takes a step back, right? Or doesn't really speak the things or her truth in that moment because she's seeing that he's really not necessarily in the mood for it. So again, but if she wants to express something that's not being met, one of her needs are not being met in that moment, or she's been holding on to it for a long period of time, whatever. So when does she express this to him? If he is setting the tone and he seems to be in an irritated state for a long period of time, let's put it that way. When does she ever get a chance to come in and say, hey, my needs are not being met?
Well, I'm very.
So one of the
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. So one of the strategies that they talk about in Gottman, which is one of the famous or more popular couple dynamics, is having a State of the Union. So the State of the Union of the relationship is a weekly meeting. We check in. How are your needs meeting? I mean, there's a series of questions. But how can I show you more love or whatever? And I feel like, you know, we all have our bad moments. I definitely strongly encourage clients to talk about, because we all have our own stuff that we need to work through. So if I'm triggered, it's not my partner's responsibility to calm me down. I have to do that work. So if that means I need to step away for 5, 10, 15 minutes, no more, it shouldn't be a whole day. And there's a whole bunch of different strategies around that. But then we need, and in my time away, I'm calming down, I'm thinking of solutions, and we're re-engaging to find a solution in our calm state, right? So I feel like that is a conversation that couples don't have. It's just like, okay, well, I'm mad, I'm gonna be over here, and I'm not gonna calm down. I'm mad, I'm gonna be over here, I'm not gonna calm down, and then nothing gets resolved. So I feel like there's a number of strategies that you learn when you go to couples therapy that you can implement so that you can learn how to regulate yourself, come back, find some solutions, and do the work of continuous checking in with one another on date nights, whether you're watching a movie, whatever, but having those continual check-ins.
Now, is calming down reasonable for?
Go ahead, Taryell.
No. You go.
I think the main thing that you really said, Walanda, is like knowing your partner to know when to give him or
I think she froze.
Are you? Oh, okay. So it's not me. Okay.
I think she froze. So while she gets back up, oh, there you go.
Okay. What I'm saying is that you have to know your spouse, and you have to feel the vibe to know when to let off and let him or her have their space calm down, and to respect that. And then again, that second key is not to let it linger into the next day or into another level of your relationship. So I think that is key to really know, like, you know what, he or she needs his space. I'm gonna give that to him or her. But like for me personally, I am very outspoken, and because of the relationship that we do have, like at the end of the day, I like to debrief. Like that's just what I like to do at the end of the day. What's going on? How do we feel? Because I personally don't want to wake up the next morning with what was going on before. And if we can kind of hash it out, or at least majority of it, before we can actually wake up the next morning, I feel better mentally. So again, it depends on the relationship and your vulnerability, right? Like it goes back to vulnerability again. Like, can you be vulnerable and say, you know what, you upset me because you didn't give me that time and space that I needed to really decompress because of work or whatever the case may be, and then come back and say, you know what, now I'm ready for us to talk about it. And again, going to see a therapist can really help with trying to manage how does that look and how does that look within your own household and how busy you are.
I just wanted because Walanda, you said that you can give there's techniques to give like somebody like 10-15 minutes so they can have their space and then come back to the conversation. But what if you're with somebody who is stunted in their social emotional intelligence and growth? Is there techniques that will take about 10-15 minutes for that type of individual too, or would they need a longer period?
I mean, my guess would be they would probably need a longer period. But again, these are things. I'll just say this. I feel like sometimes I feel like there's both men and women in my experience, in my clinical experience. There have been both men and women where one or the other is more emotionally intelligent than the other. So then they try to take on the role of not necessarily their therapist, but I can help them fix themselves. And if you have a partner who does not know how to regulate their emotions and they're constantly operating from fight, flight, freeze, like constantly, that's some work that needs to be done. Period, point blank. You can't do that work for them. They need to do that work because you're never going to have a logical, rational, reasonable conversation with someone who is operating from their animal mind, which is that fight, flight, or freeze.
Yeah. So would it be best for them to get their own individual work done
Absolutely.
in therapy instead of like couples therapy?
That's where you start.
Absolutely. And also too, you could still, I mean, I've had clients where they go to like couples therapy every other month, and then every other week, and then like that bi-weekly month. I mean, I keep saying month, week is for him, right? Like that individual therapy. And then the other week that they don't have couples therapy is for her, because there's just some things that you just want to decompress and just talk about as a man separately, as well as for the woman separately. So I've had instances again where they go to the marital counselor every other week, and then that other week is for them just to, impact some things of what's going on.
I have another deeper question, but I don't want to take over Marshaun's questions.
Okay, how long is this question going to take? Because we need to ask one more question before we wrap the show.
We
No,
got
just go
15
ahead,
minutes.
Marshaun, go ahead. Because
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Marshaun.
He gonna take over. He gonna take over. Okay.
He already taking over. You see the mic? You see how it's going?
Right?
Oh boy.
Okay, so as you guys were speaking, this question was not on the list, but I do have to ask it because I'm finding and seeing a lot of women in powerful positions. And do you find, maybe not even necessarily for yourself, but friends, family members, that Black women in powerful positions, alpha female types, right? But also in powerful positions, are they able to separate that power from home as well as, the office? Is that a possibility to do that? And basically, are they able to leave that alpha title at the door once they go home, basically?
Thank you for this question.
Oh, you're welcome. Okay.
That was lit. That was lit.
That really was so. For me, let's see. So on a personal level, it's hard for me. I can't turn off. Like, I'm just gonna be honest. Like, I'm an alpha. Like, that's who I am. And my spouse knows it. He embraces it. But at the same time, I know when to lower it. You know what I mean? Depending on what's going on in our household. So I think being an alpha female makes me who I am, and it's probably what attracted him to me. But at the same time, I know how to it's like a wave. So depending on what's going on, depending on if I know things need to get done, I get it done. That's just the alpha in me. This is what I have to do. But then if I know that, we're chilling, we're vibing, he wants to get some things done, cool, do it. So for me personally, I can't turn it off. Now professionalism, I've had clients where because that female was an alpha and it really overrided her relationship because she had control issues. So for her, it was hard for her to turn it off in the sense of trying to be an alpha and control everything in all levels of her life. But again, when it comes to when it comes to control, that's something that woman or male has to work on for themselves, because majority of the time, control issues really falls back to trust, right? So that's what I have to say about that.
And I'm going to say all things are possible with Christ Jesus for the win.
You and your mic drops.
Right.
Your mic drops.
So I'm gonna just throw this question out here. How do you propose therapy for an alpha personality or someone who has a stigma associated with therapy, like most of individuals in our community do, whether it be alpha male or alpha female, that has that stigma with therapy, and they clearly need the help?
You tell her to listen to our show, Mindful Moments. Second and fourth Thursday, God Radio 1, 7 p.m. PST, 10 p.m. EST. And we'll help them work through some of those.
Right.
We'll talk about some of those stigmas and normalize it. So normalize therapy.
And what I like to do, because when I was doing therapy for our population in DC, majority of them was going to therapy because they had to, whether they were on probation or because they were, in a psychiatric hospital and they're like, okay, it's mandated. So with something like that, I think education is key and really impacting how have you dealt with trauma? How have you dealt with stressors? And unpacking, it's like, okay, so do you see how by you recognizing, for an example, that your mom, dad, uncle, they deal with stress through drugs and alcohol, how has that benefited your life? And then really looking at, so these are the things that you can do to help you when you're not stressed. And then with that type of psychoeducation and really breaking, he or she can go into their neighborhood, let them know of their experience, especially with the Black therapist, where that education can be spread within the community to really break stigma.
And I have a question. I have a question for that along with what Marshaun was saying, just to top that, just to piggyback off of that. Now, how does an alpha female control the desire to compete with the spouse? How would you like control the desire? Okay, well, competition is good, but at the same time, too, how would you control the competitive nature of an alpha female?
That, to me, that sounds like control issues. Like, why is it that you can't relinquish that control to your husband or to your wife? And why is it that you don't trust your husband or wife of those tasks? So it goes down, to me, again, it really breaks down to there's something internally with that person that feels like they have to control their spouse or they have to control their marriage, where they can't just trust them. Like, okay, babe, like, even though I really want to do it, I'm gonna let you do it. Like, I'm not gonna, there's just some things you just have to pick your battles. And again, like Walanda said earlier, that is a self issue that person really has to work on, with that self-control, and to relinquish that and really trust that person to really say, babe, okay, I'm good. Go ahead and do it. Does that make sense?
But I would also add to that is, let's really look at where control comes from. It could come from trauma. It could come from anxiety. So it's not like, I just want to be in control because I want to be the boss. I want to be in control so I can know that this is going to be safe for me.
That's good.
And I think when we look at it from like, oh, they just always want to be in charge and they just want to be the boss, then we lose our compassion to engage with that person from that place. And so whether alpha male, alpha female, I'm not trying to break your control. I want to help you feel safe. What can I do as a partner to help you feel safer? These are conversations we need to have. Not, I hate that you always got a checklist when we're going to my mother's house. I hate that you always got to have all these things packed up. Babe, what's going on? Like, we need to have different questions and different explorations. And sometimes what couples do is they don't explore anymore. They just make assumptions. Well, they've been this way for 5 years. Like, well, I mean, they changed in those 5 years. How about you ask questions? Are you making an assumption based on the lens you're looking through? Or are you still taking that time to learn your 5-year evolved partner?
I love that you really broke that down. If I can just say one last thing, Walanda, I loved what you said, because at the end of the day, and that's why I love, and that's why my passion is therapy or being a therapist, because it's so much deeper than just what is on the surface, so much deeper. And you really nailed it. Majority of the time of what I see in my personal life, as well as a therapist, it's anxiety, it's trust, as well as feeling safe. So if the only way and not just me personally, but if the only way somebody feels safe is when they do something, then they have to unpack that with the therapist of why is it that you only feel safe by you only trusting yourself with your child, or only trusting yourself if you always have to drive because you don't feel safe if somebody else drives, or you don't feel safe if somebody else, takes care of your child. So I love that, having more empathy for your spouse and asking questions like, well, why is it that you do this? Allow me to, in my significant other, I love how he said this recently. He's like, allow me to enter your minds. Like, we're in this together. So whatever you're thinking, allow me to be there, because the more I allow him in my mind, the more he can learn about me, to understand my nuances and why I do the things that I do that he may not understand. So like you said, instead of trying to change that person, oh, well, that makes sense. And then I say, so how can I help you with whatever you're battling with right now? I love what you said, Walanda. Thank you for bringing that up.
I have a quick question. So before we close out, we have about 5 minutes left. Are there certain things that a woman should expect, a wife should expect the husband to do, and certain things a husband should expect the wife to do?
That's I want to just piggyback on that question with the same alpha is what about income? What is the expectation of an alpha? If a alpha woman is making more money than her spouse,
then make the money, boo.
I love your generalized questions. I love the generalized questions, and there's so much sarcasm in that statement. It's up to the individual couple.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Y'all two decide.
Yeah,
that's y'all business.
Mm-hmm.
You and your partner decide what that means, what you guys want that to look like, what your expectations are. That's not for any. There's no generalized answer to that.
Mm-hmm.
I want to
expectations that a husband should be doing certain things and a wife should be doing certain things. There shouldn't be on either side. Like I should express to my wife, my future wife, like I expect her to do X, Y, Z. Like maybe 90% of men believe that this should be the case, and maybe the same thing for women. Like maybe say 95% of women expect the man to make the income, where maybe 90% of women may
Those
expect
are expectations.
But you're not married to that 95%.
But also, these are the conversations that we need to take a deeper dive into.
Hold on. I want to interject something really just 1 minute, and then you guys can go right back to this. Something that we're forgetting is that this is something that happened biblically when man and woman committed their first sin. That enmity that God is talking about that's been placed between man and women, this is what we're talking about. This whole issue of who makes the most money, who should be in control, who should dictate, who should dominate, who should be the alpha, who should be the beta, like all this stuff, that is the enmity that God is talking about that's been placed in between man and women to divide us. And if we don't understand what is really happening in the dynamic, during the dynamic, it is going to cause us to walk away from the conversation and be divided. Because far too often, we get ourselves caught up in this idea that God is not in control of what is going on. Marriage is about God's ministry with two people becoming one flesh. If you don't remember that, then everything that you're doing in the way that you're operating, the way that you're perceiving what is going on, you're looking at it from the wrong lens. If my partner is making $300,000 a year, go get it. Go get it. We just made $300,000 a year. More power to you. That gives us more seed to sow, more people we can reach, more people we can bless, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like, but if you're looking at it through this lens of like, oh, I'm this and I gotta be that and this and that, that's that enmity. That's the enemy. You're allowing the enemy to circulate into that negative thought region where now you're looking at this from what it's not supposed to be. And that is where 90% of our problems lie in marriage and relationships. Is we're not looking at this from a biblical or a spiritual point of view. And that's all I got.
What's that?
Dang. I don't even know if I want to say what I wanted to say now. Jeez.
Well said, Mike. Thank you.
Ladies, could you take us home with this? Going back to us getting the therapy so we could have more dialect or finding a show. One thing that I had trouble with when I was finding the therapist is the feeling of safety. I felt safe if I had a Black therapist sitting on the other side because I felt more connected. Where can we find Black therapists and where's the best place to find that safety in whether it be a Black woman, Black man therapist? Because I don't see a directory out here where we can find you guys.
I mean, there's Black Girls Therapy, which is, that's a website. There's Black Girls Therapy. You could definitely go there. But you may have to dig, depending on where you are located, to find a Black therapist, right? So I'm not going to throw shade because I don't really know too much about the Midwest, but you might be in a space where it's not going to be that open for you. And so you might have to dig a little bit on Psychology Today, and you have to look up specifically Black therapists in my area. But Black Girls Therapy is specifically Black girls giving therapy to Black people. I don't know if there's a male one or male equivalent, but I also believe, I think Taraji P is doing something.
Say that. Yeah.
I'll let you talk more about that because you know more than I do.
Yeah, so I know that, and I can jot down the information in the Facebook comments, but yeah, I know that Taji P. Henson has a foundation where you can type in like your zip code and African American therapists populate with whatever area you're in, and that's for Black therapist, whether it's for a male or a female. But yeah, I'll get all the resources and the information. I'll jot it down in the link. But I know like Tahaja P. Henson has that type of support. She also has like a resource section as well. And I mean, I'm going to be doing it soon, where you can look up other African American mental health professionals as well in your area and their specialty. And that's the key thing. Look for a therapist that specializes in whatever you're looking for, whether it's anxiety and depression, whether it's trauma, whether it's couples therapy, because of course, we could talk about a variety of different things, right? And diagnose, but it is important that you look at their specialization and exactly what you're really trying to get help with.
Thank you for that, ladies. Marshaun, William, take us home.
Marshaun, Walanda, Merencia, thank you, ladies, for joining our show today. You guys brought such a really great dynamic, ideas and thoughts that some of them I ain't even thought about, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners haven't thought about either. So hopefully we could do this sometime again in the near future, discuss other things that.
Yeah, people are already requesting it around too.
Yeah, we definitely going to try to make this happen again. I know you have one other individual that does a show with you, so I know sometimes things get in the way. So hopefully next time they can come on. Marshaun, great questions. Your question is so good. We're supposed to ask 10. We only got through 5 for all of us, or maybe 6. So
yeah,
maybe
it was 6. It was 6.
6. So maybe sometimes we get to the other ones in the future. But I know Dr. T is like, hurry up in the show. So we want to thank you guys for tuning in. We will try our best to have another one in the near future. Until then, you are watching a merger of Let's Talk About It and Mindful Moments, which you can watch the second and fourth Thursday of the month right here on GLDRadio1.com. You guys take care. God bless. See you next time.
Happy New Year.